大家好，欢迎收看今天的节目。在上一期的节目当中呢，我们探讨了爱尔兰的宗教。那么在这一期节目当中呢，我们将聊一聊爱尔兰的政治，以及爱尔兰独立战争爆发的原因以及导火索。让我们一起进入今天的对话。
There were these various movements towards home rule, which were sort of happening. The British political establishment was more or less on side with that. There was some opposition, but it was kind of heading that way. But then the First World War broke out, and everything was sort of suspended. And also, Ireland had become, the whole island of Ireland had started... Including Northern Ireland, or Ulster, had started to become very different politically.
Why? Is it because of geography reason?
No, it's because of settlement. So the north of Ireland, and it's also known by its old name of Ulster, had historically been one of the most rebellious and tricky parts of Ireland, one of the most kind of Catholic parts of Ireland. But for many centuries, it had been settled by largely Scots and English, largely Scots Protestants. Settlement means you move people to it. So it had been colonised, and the whole of Ireland had, but particularly the north of Ireland. So the population of the north of Ireland in the early 20th century was a majority Protestant and loyal to the king or the queen. So those loyal...
Is it like Australia?
In what sense?
In what sense? A settlement?
Yeah, it was colonised.
Oh, colonised.
Yeah, it's not as far, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it was colonised. I mean, also quite deliberately politically, in order to make it a sort of more stable area. So people were put there and they were given land as gifts. They all moved there. And so that Northern Ireland became a fairly staunchly loyalist
To Great Britain.
to Great Britain. So those loyal Northern Ireland, as Home Rule started to happen, those people said they would fight the English to remain English.
Huh? They will fight the English in order to remain English.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, if I say to you, Ellen, you are no longer welcome in my office. I don't want to teach you anymore, and you want me to teach you. You might fight me.
Oh, fight
to stay.
To stay.
Yeah.
Oh, so English would like to get rid of that part.
Well, it was kind of going. It was sort of moving that way. Yeah. So this thing about home rule. So that would have been the whole of Ireland. So things were getting very complex. So there was really an army in the north of Ireland who were willing to fight anyone who was going to make them not be English, including the English. And that led to a build-up of armies in the south of Ireland who wanted home rule or to become independent. It wasn't completely on religious grounds. So there were Protestants who wanted independence or home rule, and there were some Catholics who were quite loyal to the British Crown. So it wasn't clearly Catholic Protestant.
So it's not like fully related to religion.
Not well. It sort of became more. I mean, as we'll talk about what happens later, but at that time, no, it was more complicated. It was connected, but it wasn't like black and white.
Okay.
And a lot of the great figures of Irish independence or revolution were actually Protestant.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of complicated. But if we're now moving into the 20th century, and we've basically got Britain largely wants Ireland to have home rule. The south of Ireland would like to have home rule. The north of Ireland wants to remain part of the United Kingdom. And then the First World War broke out or began breaking out, and everything kind of stopped. So I think if the First World War hadn't broken out and there had been a slightly different politicians in Britain, then probably what happened next might not have happened. But what happened was the leaders of Irish independence arranged a revolution.
A revolution.
In 1916.
East arising.
The Easter Rising, which is in 1916. That's at the time of the First World War. So the First World War is going on. The British are fighting the Germans, and the Irish, in Dublin especially, mount a kind of a revolution.
A revolution against English.
Against the English. So they take over big parts of the city. They take over the GPO and the Bank of Ireland and and various places. And there are some really kind of...
Did Ireland join a First World War fighting against German?
Well, Ireland didn't exist.
Oh, didn't exist.
As
At
I
that
say,
period of time?
At that period of time.
Yeah. Part of Great Britain.
Yes.
So it's represented by Great Britain.
Did Irish people fight in the First World War?
Yeah.
Yes, in huge numbers.
Against German.
Against the Germans. Lots of Northern Irish fought. A very high number of Northern Irish fought and died, especially in the first day of the Somme. So it's kind of... Ireland's fascinating because history is very present. Most English people have kind of forgotten about the First World War. I mean, they know it happened. They know that people died. They probably had a great-granddad who died. Apart from that, they're like... Whereas in Northern Ireland, Northern Irish Protestants, certainly when I was younger, had a real knowledge of the history. Because the death of Ulstermen in the battles of the Somme was sort of considered to be the reason why they should remain within the United Kingdom, that they'd sacrificed themselves in huge numbers to protect Britain, England. Also, interestingly, an awful lot of Irish people fought in the First World War. But in the years that followed, they were kind of not talked about or considered to be traitors. So if you go to Dublin, you can go up Grafton Street and there's a park called Stephen's Green, which gets mentioned in Ulysses. And there's a big war memorial as you enter it, a big gate. And in Dublin it's called Traitors' Gate.
Traitors' Gate?
Yeah, because the men that fought and died during the First World War were not at the time, but were later considered to be traitors. So it's quite a cruel history, really, because those men were part of Britain, part of the British Empire. So anyway, this rising happens in Dublin. The British send troops to put it down. There's a brief kind of battle, lasts a couple of days. The Irish are defeated. A lot of Dublin is laid to waste. If you walk around Dublin now, you can see bullet holes everywhere. And then still, yeah. You can see, like, you can find them. And then something really interesting happened. So the English arrested most of the leaders of the rebellion. Some of them were killed, but a lot of them are captured. And then they made what's considered in Irish history to be a terrible mistake.
Killed all the people?
Yeah, they executed them. And that was considered by the majority of the Irish population, who up to that point had been fairly mixed in their loyalties, actually. They turned more or less wholesale against the English rule. And what happens next is a war of independence.